Debi from College Australia, and I'm here this morning just to have a little chat with you about an effective way to complete your assessments. Some little tips that I've learned over my years in the industry that will help you get your answers correctly and accurately the first time. Make sure they relate to what the question is asking, and also that your answers are in the correct context. I've seen often over the years the same errors being made, so I just want to provide for you just some tips that you can do. They're very quick, and once you've done them, you do them once or twice, and they become almost a habit. And this is going to help you answer your questions correctly the first time. It will save you time because you won't have to resubmit. And I think you'll learn a lot by doing that, because you can apply these tips to other areas as well. It's not just question answering. So we'll get started with there's 4 points that I'll be talking to you about today. And those points will help you be able to address the question and what it's asking. We're going to look at two-part questions, questions that have two questions in the question. That can be a bit confusing. We tend to look at the first part of the question and then stop and answer that and don't address the second part of the question. So we'll look at how you can do that and how you can read your question correctly. We're also going to look at picking out key words in questions that will tell you exactly what that question is asking you to do. Generally in a sentence there will be 4 or 5 key words that are all you need to know to understand exactly what you need to do with that question. So we'll be looking at those key words and mind mapping the questions, pulling those key words out, and just using the words that tell you exactly what to do. And then we're also going to look at ensuring that you use the correct word for when a question is asking you to do something. Is it how do you do it, why do you do it, when you would do it, and what you do it. So the how, what, when, and why words, you need to be very conscious of exactly which one you're addressing. So if a question asks how you would do something, you wouldn't explain why you would do it. So we'll look at those this morning. Just some quick little tips for you. So we'll get started with the two-part questions. And sometimes I know they can be confusing and frustrating, and I agree with that. But the reality is there are a lot of two-part questions in assessments. So for you to be able to identify that, what you need to do is start reading the question, and when you get to a point where you see the word "and," that's telling you there's more to the question. There's a second part of the question. For example, the question, it might be a work health and safety unit that you're doing. The question may say, explain the legislation that you need to consider in relation to workplace health and safety and to organizational policies and procedures. So that's a big two-part question. So if you break it up, you'll find it much easier to answer, and you will provide the right information. So explain the legislation that you need to consider in relation to work health and safety. The first obvious answer would be the Work Health and Safety Act, and it may be having policies and procedures in place. The second part then is asking you to organizational policies and procedures. Now those are based on the legislation, so an organization may have a work health and safety policy and procedure for evacuation in an emergency, how you evacuate the building and where your meeting point may be. Another policy and procedure may be that you complete an incident report if you get injured. So that's just a very simple example, but the principle applies to any type of question that you'll be answering. So those are two-part questions. Again, just make sure you read the full question, then break the question down. I doubt that you would ever see a three-part question. I have seen them occasionally, but they're very rare. So if you break the question in half, and when you see the word "and," that's the second part of your question. Okay, then we're going to look at mind mapping questions. Very quick and very easy to do. We'll use that same question as an example. Or I'll give you a different question. So we'll stick with health and safety because that's common to every qualification that anyone would be doing. So it would be relevant to all of you. So can you identify the hazards in the picture below? Now you need to identify the keywords in that sentence. So the first keyword is identify. So you're always going to have a verb in there that is a key word, an action word. The words "can you please" really don't have anything to do with what the question actually wants you to do. They're just words to make sense. You wouldn't write an assessment or a question with 4 words in it. So it makes the sentence make sense. But identify would be your first keyword. The second keyword in that question is hazards. So identify hazards. So that's telling you what you need to do. And then in the picture below, so there must be a picture of a workplace with hazards in the picture that you need to identify. So there's 4 words, 4 key words that will tell you exactly what you have to, how you have to answer that question. So identify, hazards, picture, below. Out of that whole sentence, 4 words is all you need to answer that correctly. So remember the question was, can you please identify, keyword, the hazards, keyword, hazard, in the picture below. 2 keywords. If you can do that with all of your questions, it will, for one, be a lot faster for you, so you'll finish quicker. But it tells you exactly, there's no mistaking what that question is asking you to do by mind mapping it and pulling out the keywords. And there will be the action words, as we said, verbs. So that's a very key word. That's going to tell you what you have to do. Okay? And the last little tip for today will be using the words or answering correctly to the words how, why, when, and what. So if a question asks, what would you do if you identified a hazard in your workplace? So I would expect your answer to explain to me the process you would take if you identified a hazard. I wouldn't expect your answer to tell me why you should identify hazards. So it's really important that you, again, mind map, pull the keywords out. If the keyword is how, you have to explain a process that you would follow. If it asks you why, you would explain the importance of identifying and reporting hazards. If it asks you when you may report hazards. That could be when you're on your lunch break. You might be in the staff room and there's water on the floor, or there might be a frayed electrical cord or whenever. So there's lots of opportunities of when you would identify and report something, and what. So if it asks, what is a hazard? You would explain that a hazard is a possibility of someone being hurt in the workplace. That needs to be reported before something happens. And I've done this many times. I'm just as guilty as anyone of walking around and seeing something that I'll think to myself, ooh, that looks a bit dangerous. Somebody could really get hurt. And keep on walking. Don't do anything about it. Don't report it. I just think to myself, that's dangerous. And someone will get hurt if it's not reported and it's not addressed. Someone will get hurt. So if you get that thought in your head or that gut feeling that something looks dangerous, report it. So those are what I have found in my career as a trainer as some very common mistakes that people make. Just to kind of summarize a little bit before we finish up, always be conscious of two-part questions. If you see the word "and" after a question, don't stop there. Keep reading, because there's going to be another question after that. If you want to pick out the key words so that you know exactly what that question is asking you, that will help you answer the question directly as well. So if you have the words "identify hazards pictured below," as in the question that we talked about, you only need 4 words. You don't need the whole sentence. So don't focus on the words that really aren't explaining anything to you. Focus on the words that tell you what you need to do. So you pick those key words out and you focus on them. And then using how, why, when, what correctly, it's critical that you answer to what the question is asking. Be mindful of the word that a question begins with, because quite often that will tell you it'll begin with one of those 4 how, why, when, and what words. So that's the way you need to address the question. And if you do that with all of your assessments, I think you will be very surprised at how easy questions are to answer. We make them harder than they need to be, I think, and myself included. It's not only one group of people that do this. We all do it. But we have to train ourselves to do it differently. And over the years that I've had in this industry, I try to teach all my students these 4 key points before we even start an assessment, so that you can not only get the correct words, but you can get the correct context, so that it does address what your question is asking you. I know it's quick, but it was just a quick little welcome and to let you know that we'll be doing more Facebook Lives in the near future. So if you have any questions, if you need any help with anything, please feel free to contact us. We're always here to support our students and help our students and potential students, to make you aware that we do have these Facebook Lives where you can jump in and listen to some tips or information that we have for you. So thank you for your time today and for joining our first Facebook Live. And I will see you soon. Bye-bye.